Welcome to day 2 of our MIDD Plus Scientific Conference. We are so glad that you've elected to join us today. My name is Jill Fiedler-Kelly. I am the president of the Cognigen Division of Simulations Plus, and I'm delighted to welcome everyone today to our continuing discussion regarding women in science. Thank you very much for being here. So 2 years ago, at our inaugural MIDD Plus conference, we initiated this forum as a place to convene folks interested in sharing their perspectives and discussing issues facing women in science today. That first discussion in 2021 took place during the COVID lockdown and at a time when the tremendous initial impacts of the pandemic on women in the greater workforce was just being recognized. With that as a backdrop, the women on the panel opened up about the challenges they had faced in their scientific career journeys, and the conversation got personal very quickly, with many really impactful stories about the struggles these women had faced, as well as their perspectives about how they've overcome the challenges and continue to work for positive change. Our second discussion at last year's conference, involving a new panel of women from Simulations Plus, focused on what we'll do to support women in science today. And we invited the audience to make a commitment with us to take action based on the suggestions brought up during the discussion. Importantly, through interactions with the audience during and after both of these sessions, the idea of including men in our discussions was brought up. It is our consensus opinion that the inclusion of men and their active involvement in addressing the challenges women in science face is an essential component in moving the needle on gender equity in a positive direction. So I am very happy to get started into our discussion today with the panel of my colleagues that you see before you on the slide with their names and titles. 10 men and women representing the 4 divisions of Simulations Plus, Luxoft, DILISIM Services, Cognigen, and Simulations Plus, who I am truly privileged to work with on a daily basis. The group will share their perspectives as we make our way through this year's discussion. And with that, I will hand things over to our moderator, my wonderful colleague, Lindsay Lehmann, Executive Director of Operations for the Cognigen Division. Lindsay will guide us through today's discussion, and to get us started, she's going to introduce the 2 main themes for our session today. Lindsay?
Thank you so much, Jill, and thank you all for joining us today. Before we dive into our session, there are a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to review with you. First, you can ask questions at any time. There's a Q&A tab within Excel event that we encourage you to use and post your question there. If time permits, we will address these questions at the end of our discussion. If we do run out of time, however, we will follow up with a response post-panel. Secondly, we have a couple polls today that we're going to be posting throughout the session for your participation. And now bringing us back to the session specifically, there are 2 timely themes that we will be discussing today. The first is how can we create a psychological safe space at work to support women at all stages of their careers and allow them to learn, grow, and thrive. And then the second is how can we encourage authentic allyship of, and within those discussions, what are some of the challenges and what works and what doesn't work? So all of my colleagues will be sharing their personal perspectives and experiences today. And with that, we're going to jump into the psychological safe space theme and corporate policies that have supported women to provide equity both at home and at work. Noting that family-friendly work environments are extremely important to women and often allow them to be primary caregivers. And with that, we're going to hear from my colleague Nivea first on her experiences and insights.
It's my pleasure to be here today participating. I would like to thank everyone. And in my case, when I've been looking for positions in the past, one of the most important factors for me for making my decision was the balance between work time and family time. So another important factor is that I don't have a family close to me. Our both families are in Germany and in Brazil. So it's important to maximize the family time with my daughter and my husband when I can. So in the end of the day, I need to find a balance between use my time productively in the work and also maximize my family time. So one of the most important things for me is the flexibility that our company provides to me daily. And we are a family of pharmacometricians at home. And I'm glad that our both companies provide us this flexibility of remote work. So we can work very well together during the week, to be together when we can and use our time accordingly for different meetings or and have this work balance with our family time. So that is my case. Thank you.
Thank you, Nivea. We're also going to hear from my colleague Kyunghee on gender equity and the importance of it not only at work but also at home.
Thanks. I also have a toddler, so I fully agree with and being appreciative of the flexibility I have to balance work and childcare. And like 3-year-old boy, he needs a lot of attention. And to add to what Nivea shared, I wanna really add that gender equity at workplace cannot be fully achieved without addressing the gender equity at home in terms of household responsibilities and also childcare. So we all heard that pandemic had a substantial effect on working moms. About 10% of the working moms with children said they quit a job due to COVID. And another 30% of working moms had to take their time off because school was closed. And these numbers are much higher for working moms than working dads, because more moms were picking up added childcare responsibilities during that difficult time. And the issue of gender inequity at home actually existed before pandemic and still exists after pandemic. So I have a toddler and he was staying at home when his preschool closed during pandemic. And now he's back in school, but there are still times he's sick at home. A couple weeks ago, he got cold and developed ear infection and had to stay at home for the full week. And like Nivea, we do not have grandparents or family members nearby to help us. But thankfully, I'm working from home and have flexible schedule, so I was able to take care of him without taking whole time off from work. However, it's still not easy to take care of a sick child while trying to attend important conference calls during the day and also catch up old work late night. Honestly, I could not have done it by myself without my husband's help. So my husband commutes to work but has a flexible schedule, so he was able to work from home and share childcare for a couple days during that week. So without his help, I might have been really burned out juggling the work and the added childcare duties. So I think gender equity at home is equally important as a gender equity at the workplace, and we need to make progress at home as well.
Thank you so much. We're also going to hear from my colleague who's in the recruiting aspect of our company, and he's going to share some observations that he's seen as far as women and men and their differences in applying and interviewing for jobs.
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this important panel discussion today. Again, looking at things from a recruitment standpoint, men tend to be more confident, sometimes overly confident, while women generally tend to be more modest or humble in the interview process. And LinkedIn backed this up with a study where they found if men and women look at the same number of jobs online, women tend to apply for less roles. I was curious to look at my own world with that study. And so I looked at the last 20 unqualified candidates for one of our pharmacometrics openings that we have. And it did turn out 16 of those were men and 4 of those were women. So although not a deep scientific study by any means, I think it does show, or at least highlight an example of where men are more likely to apply to a role, even when not qualified. And maybe women are just smarter and pickier in their decisions to apply, which is not a bad thing. But I do encourage women to go after that new job or promotion, even if you don't check all the boxes on a job description. You don't have to have 100% of the things on a job description to go after. If you're interested, go for it. Don't be afraid to apply. Lincoln also thought it may not be just confidence, but they saw that especially in more senior or leadership roles, women were less likely to apply. And so their thought is because those senior roles often require more time, that can be more difficult, as our panel has already mentioned with childcare. And we know that often women are more often the childcare provider. So I'm proud that Simulations Plus offers fully remote and hybrid options for our employees, and also gives them flexible schedules and flexible time off, which can make a world of difference in parents in situations like that. So I'm proud to be a part of that. And I also thought about how I and other men can be an ally to our female counterparts. And as a recruiter and an HR rep, I feel the best thing that I can do is just treat everyone fairly and equally as best I can, regardless of demographic. So when I'm reviewing resumes or judging interview processes, to keep those things to the side and just focus on background and experience and how the interview is going, and do my best to not consider those other factors. That, and I think just listen more. I think we all can do that, but especially men can listen more, and not, as sometimes we can tend to be overly confident, as I mentioned, don't dominate that decision making, and be open to new ideas, and make sure all voices at the table are heard. So those are some of my thoughts from a high level perspective, and thanks again for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing your experience. Jill's also going to share with us her experience from the leadership perspective of how you can, create that safe space for your colleagues and employees.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. So yeah, to dig in a little bit more on what I think we really mean by creating a psychological safe space and how we think about doing that. We've talked in our previous sessions about the challenges of work-life balance. We've already talked about that this morning, and being comfortable bringing our authentic self to work was another topic. I think it really is the intertwining of issues that's important here. We all know no one completely leaves their home life at home when they come to work, and they don't leave their work life at work either. I know I certainly don't. So as leaders, I think understanding that we get the whole person at work each day, it's good to really try to understand what's going on in people's lives so that we can provide more support and flexibility to folks when it's needed, and create an environment where people feel really comfortable being themselves, where they're able to fully express who they are without any fear that letting that guard down means they're going to be viewed or treated any differently. I think that as leaders of organizations, either big or small, we need to critically examine the policies we have in place with an eye toward inclusivity, based on understanding the differing needs of our society, that everyone really has the ability to succeed. Perhaps reevaluating your company's or your department's values and interpreting those in a way that works for different types of employees can be accomplished by different folks in different ways would be another thing to consider. Being really vigilant of and aware of the interactions that happen both within and between teams, so that certain types of behaviors can be either reinforced or discouraged, might be another important aspect. I think all of this can just serve to reinforce that positive impact that progress toward greater gender equity can have on the company's culture overall. Now, one of the policies that we have recently adopted Plus is around parental leave, something that I think has become more commonplace over the past few years. But importantly, the policy not only covers women who give birth, but also the ability for male parents to similarly take time off to care for children. And as we heard from Kyunghee already, I think policies like this, as they become more widely adopted and both women and men take advantage of them, then we start to even things out a little bit and it starts to normalize. Another thought would be to align the goals we establish for people in our organizations and the rewards with progress towards adopting greater DEI principles. So to do that, I think we need to communicate and over-communicate the positive benefits of greater diversity and inclusivity on the organization. There is a lot of research out there, positive outcomes and impact in terms of greater creativity, more innovation, and better decision-making that comes with increased diversity in teams. So to come back to the topic of women in leadership roles, I think the current imbalance at the highest leadership levels for women, maybe even more so for women of color, means that there's probably greater scrutiny and maybe more pressure for women who are in these roles to serve as role models for other women, so they can see examples of other women who are accomplishing things at those levels. So I know we'll talk more about this later in the discussion today, but for now, let me just add one more point, that I think the same diversity principles can apply to the manner or style in which women lead. So if COVID has taught us nothing else, we've all gained a greater appreciation probably that none of us has perfect sight to what's to come. We may need to navigate some really uncharted territory as leaders. And the outdated concept of leadership, that leaders are the people who, you know, jump up and keep a cool head and tell everyone what to do and are very commanding in their style, I think is not reflective of what's needed in a lot of organizations, either now or in the future. A more transparent, vulnerable, and collaborative leadership style that might come more naturally to some women leaders, I think can be very effective as well.
Thank you so much, Jill. I think along the same lines of this psychological safe space that you have alluded to for women, there's especially kind of a need for it for STEM fields or specialties because they tend to be male dominated. So we're going to hear from some of our colleagues on their experiences with being a woman within a STEM specialty. And we'll start with my colleague, An.
Thank you, Lindsay, and good morning, everyone. So the story that I bring to you today is to show how a psychological and emotionally healthy workplace can help bring more women and girls into STEM field and other traditional male-dominated fields. So I was born and raised in Vietnam and was proud to be the first generation in college. And in as early as freshman year in high school, I remember telling my mom of how much I would like to be a math teacher. But she would tell me, well, you know, there's like you who are working there, so it will be difficult that path. You may not have enough support to help you to thrive and succeed. So I would rather you considering a more traditional jobs for females. So the advice my mother gave me merely came from her love and care for me. So because she would not want me to hit on a rocky road. I did not feel belittled by her comment, but rather took it too hard and maybe I should pursue something else. But what has changed in me and encouraged me to go on with my passion for mathematics came from a lot of women in the field that I started to encounter in my adulthood. For example, my college best friend was an engineer major and now working for a water company in Berkeley. Both of my advisors for PhD were women. They not only helped me to advance academically, but also provide me with opportunities to do research and mentor other female undergraduate students under their mentorship. They both involved in so many research projects with other new and young female postdocs at our university. They show me by examples of how women can help one another to strive in a traditionally dominated workplace. And with Simulation Plus, one of the reasons why I decided to take their offer in the beginning because I thought there was a gender diversity in the company when I came on the job interview. I know that I would be in a good place here. And in fact, my supervisor is Kyunghee, who's also in the discussion panel today. And having her as a supervisor always makes me feel comfortable and safe to raise any questions that I have about the projects, or even sometimes I feel comfortable to talk to her about family life. And all of my coworkers in the division often reach out to me to ask how I'm doing and acknowledge what I have contributed to the division. So even though these are just a small gesture, but it definitely makes me feel more comfortable and included. So back to my mom's story. So after my first year in college, trying to put on some major that I didn't really care for, I called my mom on the phone and said, "Mom, I wanted to be a math major." And of course, she supported my division. It is hard for me to go against my mom, but also go against the culture that tell me what kind of job a woman is supposed to have. However, I believe the more women that we have in the field, the more support that we can provide to encourage young girls to go against the tide and pursue what they are really
Thank you so much, Anne, for your sharing your personal story with us. I think along the lines of, again, creating this psychological safe space for women within STEM, Simulations Plus has done a lot from a corporate point of view to make that space safe for us. And Lindsay Luke from our HR department is going to kind of share what some of those policies are.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. Simulations Plus strives to bring in diversity to the company. Currently, 52% of our staff, our scientific staff, are female. And if we're going to do that, then we need to have the policies that are going to support that in the long term. So I think it was, Kyunghee who noted from the beginning flexible work schedules. Nivea talked about it. Applying that to schedules to understand that flexibility doesn't mean the same thing to every person, and everybody's situation is different. We talked a while back, I think pre-pandemic, people talked about flexible work environments, and it often meant like a 980 schedule where you could take 3 days off for the weekend if you worked extra hours during the week. And that really put undue pressure on some who did need to provide childcare, because daycare pickups, now you have to extend your workday and you have commutes and things like that. Is it really truly flexible? And so what we've worked toward at Simulations Plus is a true flexible and remote environment. So, what do people need? What does flexibility mean to those employees who it's important to? And that's kind of the culture that we've created. And then Jill touched again on our newest policies for parental leave. It's really important to us, especially as women choose to, have kids later in life and have put years of service into a company, and then fear that going out on a maternity leave could affect them, how it could affect their family's finances as their major contributors. We've put those policies in place to support women, not just financially though, but really encouraging that time off, compensating for the time off. And then allowing our, fathers or other caregivers as well to get in on that policy, so that there can be that dual childcare at home, that they can, form that equity. And then we like to turn around when people do return to the workplace. And as we're supporting women, we need to make sure that we tailor our culture as a company to support that. So there's a lot of things that you can do as a company to make sure that that culture is inclusive. Making space for open and transparent dialogue is a big one. We talk about our policies, we talk about what people need, garnering that feedback from employees and creating that safe space for people to share their experiences, to share their needs. Something that we've done is an engagement survey where we really look to understand what it is that people value in the workplace and how can we be a partner in those things. And then just understanding the ways that people work as teams, understanding that not everybody's situation is the same. How can we communicate better? How can we offer a supportive environment to those who we work with on a day-to-day basis, whose life at home might be a little bit different than ours? And so those are just some of the things that we're trying to do as a company, and that we hope that other companies are doing, especially coming out of this pandemic, to tailor the workplace to be as inclusive and as supportive as possible for everybody.
Thank you so much, Lindsay, for sharing that with the audience. We also have Monika from Linksoft here, and she's going to share her experiences. But I think some of the things that we've already alluded to is just take notice and understand what's happening around you, and really bringing it to the forefront of your discussions with colleagues. Monika.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, I think that official policies create a basic structure for a safe environment, but they are not enough. I mean, there is each of us is responsible every day to create an environment, a workplace, where people can feel safe, can feel respected, and can feel comfortable. So last Tuesday, I was driving by car to work, and as usual in Paris, there was a lot of traffic, and I was in a hurry. And what it made is that I switched on my mental autopilot. And it means that I was only focused on my destination, and I didn't pay much attention what was going on around. So I didn't hear my favorite song in the radio. I didn't feel the sun, which is quite a rare event in Paris. But also what is important from the security point of view on the road, I really didn't pay attention what was going on around. What were the conditions on the road, how people were driving, how I was driving. It was only getting to work as fast as possible. And when I look back on my career, I feel that very often it looked similar. I mean, I was going my path without looking around. I was at first especially doing what I like. Then it was more like doing more, faster and better. I did PhD, I did university in physics in Poland. Then I did PhD in mathematics in Italy. I did few postdocs in different mathematical and engineering research groups. And it was mainly male-dominated environment, but I was used to it. And why I was used to it? Because as a kid, I grew up in a male-dominated environment because I loved being outdoors. I loved getting dirty in the forest, playing sports, computers, driving cars. And there were not many girls that liked that. So I was surrounded by guys from very early age. So when I was at university, as a woman and being a minority in science, for me, it was like normal. And the problem is that the issues that were related to that, for me, didn't exist because it was my normal environment. So it is like driving a car and just passing by all those issues without noticing them. So why I'm saying that? There are two reasons for why I'm saying like this, my experience. One of them is that the fact that we feel comfortable in certain environments doesn't mean that everyone feels comfortable. I'm sure that around me, when at university or different research groups, institutes, there were women that didn't feel comfortable in a male-dominated environment. And noticing the differences between us and vulnerabilities that come with that is very important to create this safe place for everyone. And the second issue is that I think that when we get used to certain things, we can enter in this autopilot mode. In my case, this was being used to women in a male-dominated environment. And if I now remember, like look back, I never asked myself if being a woman had an impact on my career. I didn't see stories about sexual harassment. I didn't see people who felt uncomfortable because they had different culture or religion. I never questioned if some achievement was not recognized just because it was done by a woman. So the day when I was driving my car to work, there was an accident, not mine, but it was pretty serious between a motorbike and the car, and it made me stop. Like it made everyone stop. And this pause stopped my autopilot. So of course the questions comes, what if it was me? How it would impact my life? What if my behavior on the road impacted somehow other people on the road, and so on. I think that accidents are some moments that we reevaluate what we do and what's going on around. And of course, I don't want anyone to have an accident, but I wish that everyone pause and look around, because when we stop and we don't really focus on what we are doing and how we are doing things, then we can be a bit more conscious about what we do, how we feel, how we make other people feel, and how other people feel. And to build this kind of psychologically safe environment to each other. Because and it's not really only about being a woman. It's about any gender. It's about any sexual orientation, about any culture, religion, or skin color. It's like each of us has different past and different experience. And this diversity is a strength for a company because it brings creativity. But I think that it requires our effort, like every day, to make that everyone can feel okay being themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monika. At this point, we're going to pause for a poll. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Arlene.
Thank you. Yes, it is a great time to pause for a poll. So here we go. What tool, method, or approach do you use to create a psychologically safe space? Hopefully everyone can see the polls. It's going to be on your right-hand control panel. You got about 20 seconds to go ahead and answer that question. I also want to remind everyone that we will hopefully have time for some Q&A. So if you do have a question, you can either send a chat to me, put the chat in the post, or put it directly in the Q&A tab also on the right-hand side. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. And Lindsay, it looks like we've got 63% coming in at encourage listening, make space for equal and open discussions. So let's continue the discussion. Take it away.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I think the result of that poll kind of leads us right into our next theme, which is authenticity of allyship, and how can men be better allies for women colleagues? And additionally, what are maybe some of the challenges that women face in leadership roles, and how can we move forward in creating, a more equitable workspace? So with that, I'm going to invite our colleague Maxime to share his experiences, both in his personal and professional life.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for everybody for making me a part of this panel. What I wanted to say on this word, it's really to echo what Monika has mentioned, is there were two others, recognition and personal action. And I think as a guy, in order to be an ally to women, the first step I had to do in my personal and professional life was to recognize there was an issue in many cases. And I got my epiphany moment when almost 10 years ago now, before that moment, I just assumed everybody had the same treatment as I used to have in meetings, or I still have. Like, I'm a tall guy, so typically people tend to listen to me for whatever reason. And I just assumed it was the same for everybody. And talking with some friends that like colleagues, they were not echoing the same feelings about being listened and so on. And we actually ran a small experimentation. Like, we were in a meeting and my colleague brought an idea and she was not listened. And I brought the same idea like, literally 2 minutes later. And suddenly the boss and the colleagues were like, oh, this is great, like we should do that and so on. So it really helped me to realize that there is an issue. And then knowing that, it helped me to grow and to try, and still probably can improve, but try to be an ally to women. And now I'm aware of the situation, I want to really take that into consideration in a way that is managing some of my colleagues, like women colleagues, to understand, and maybe if I feel they haven't been listened, it may not be because they haven't been able to convey the idea, but because the public hasn't been able to receive the idea. So it's really something to consider in terms of management. And this is obviously a problem. And I try to push my friends, my colleagues, even within my family, all of the women surrounding me to be more vocative and to be more, get what they deserve and try to push. And if I see an issue, not hesitate to raise my voice. So that's how I think at a personal level, I can be an ally, but of course there is more that can be done from institutions and so on.
Thank you so much, Maxime. We're also going to hear from our colleague Josh on his experience with having a female manager, and then also how he supported her with maybe some of the challenges that she faced while being in a leadership role.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you to everyone for letting me be part of this panel. In a previous company, we had a reorganization, and anytime one of those happened, there's a lot of uncertainty. But my new leader, I knew three things going into our new relationship. I knew that every meeting I had been in with her, she was always the smartest person in the room. I knew that she was willing to basically outwork anybody at our company. And I knew that a lot of her communication style was often viewed as a bit abrasive. As we started to build our relationship together, I realized that many of those things were who she was. She was an incredibly intelligent person that had worked very hard to educate herself and learn on the job every day. I learned that a lot of that intrinsic motivation was really her willingness to continue to outwork people around her, and oftentimes led to some of that abrasiveness. But I also learned that a lot of that was her being in a male-dominated leadership world, feeling that she had to be tough, feeling that she had to take those extra steps to protect her team, to protect the people that she worked with. And that was one of those things that I was able to learn from and take to protect my own team, create a safe space for them to fail, create a safe space where we work together. But I also learned that I needed to champion for her in our organization to overcome some of those perceptions of her as a leader with the experiences that she's had. I also took that into my personal life and my own learnings as a way to coach my own daughter into, you're always going to be the best when you lean into who you are, those attributes that make you who you are. And ultimately, along the way, you will come with some of these challenges of those perceptions, and those experiences will happen. So that awareness piece is always key in that. But I definitely took that away as a champion on the work front, and my sure that she knew that she had into who she was, but also make sure that we understand and help champion together to overcome some of those pieces.
Thank you so much, Josh, for sharing your experience. We're also going to hear from Jill on, being a woman leader herself, and, how she came to be and what allyship she had received from a prominent male in her field.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yes, more than 20 years working under the mentorship of a prominent male leader. Some of the folks on this call may know Ted Grissella. And in point of fact, from the earliest days when we started Cognigen, which was founded by Ted and Cindy Wallawander, another woman, and myself, our company was consistently made up of a greater percentage of women than men. When we made hiring decisions, it was always, always, always about hire for fit, emphasizing cultural fit, personality fit over skills. We felt skills could be learned, but the person had to work well with the team. So as a result, it just so happened that we tended to hire women a lot more frequently than men. And if I'm being really critical, thinking back on that, I'm sure it was a very good thing in terms of gender equity, obviously, but perhaps less so in terms of encouraging diversity in other aspects, because it really was, the way we approached the situation. So with our majority female small company, I remember in hanging around with Ted a lot, there would be comments that were made toward Ted by other males, especially in those early days. And, intended sometimes maybe in a joking way, but sometimes perhaps a more disparaging way about how he likes to surround himself with women, insinuating, of course, that there was something more to it, or that, he used that approach to get all the work done while he could sit back and tell us what to do. To Ted's credit, he would always, respond in a really supportive way about the capability of our team and everyone in the organization, and quickly and kind of humbly lessen the role that he played as a leader. And, I'm certain that in those early days, when Ted would include me in a conversation with a client or a colleague, or take me on a business trip, that I was probably contributing really little to the discussion. But having that opportunity to watch and learn really from the front row was absolutely invaluable. It also served, importantly, to publicly reinforce my potential value to the folks that we did meet at that time. So now I see that some of those connections that I made so very long ago, that grew and developed over time after working together, they really might not have been possible if not for those opportunities that were provided by Ted's inclusion and supportive. As we continued to work together over many, many years, it became more and more clear where and with whom Ted's style worked really well, and where my style also worked well. So I started to become more confident that there was a way I could try to take certain aspects of both the technical approach that Ted had and the stylistic way that he had of working, and apply those to my own leadership style, because I couldn't hope to comfortably pull off the style that he had. So a really valuable lesson I learned from Ted along the way is the value of promoting your colleagues, and in particular, the value of doing that when it's not asked for or expected, and doing it when that colleague is not necessarily there to hear it. So it's not misperceived as, I'm just saying this for your benefit. I was present often enough to hear Ted tell a client or someone else what wonderful things I could do, and honestly left me very uncomfortable because I wasn't very good at accepting compliments like that. But then also to have clients tell me things Ted had said when I wasn't present to hear them. I think that kind of endorsement can be really, really impactful, and the value of helping people to see what others are capable of and to make connections with other people is something we can all really, really easily do for each other, men and women alike. So coming back to the question of whether there's additional challenges for women in leadership roles, I absolutely think there are. Maybe they are only considered additional, so to speak, because there are so many common gender norms in terms of male leaders and the style that they have. So, everyone knows there's a not so nice name that's given to women who aren't particularly outwardly caring or empathetic, as Josh was describing. Women who are motherly, maybe, are thought of as the mom, and then possibly to be taken advantage of, as opposed to, to be looked up to. And at the same time, we don't necessarily think of a male in a leadership role as dad, because there's not sort of a common idea of exactly what that means. So, all leaders face challenges, to be sure, but as more and more women take on leadership roles, I think we'll see more styles out there and get more examples to emulate. A lesson I have tried to learn over time, which can sometimes have a gender-related spin, has to do with like the so-called male and female communication styles. And maybe we could think of that really as knowing your audience and how different communication styles work better for some than others. There's the so-called male communication style of bottom line and get right to the point. And then there's the telling a story version, the female communication style. And they are very different. But there's been a lot of material out there that talks about scientific communication styles that really promotes, in some cases, the advantages of both of those and how they both are important. So I have definitely tried over the years, although admittedly not always successfully, to not let those people that have differing styles or opinions on styles cause me to question my own style and then change it in response. In previous sessions on this, we have talked about the imposter syndrome that affects a lot of women and how many of us question our own abilities at times. I think it's really important that, and I don't think, that women should try to be more like men in their communication or leadership style, simply because there are men in those roles and many are successful, and we see examples of that. Personally, I really try to embrace the good to great concept of leaning into what you're good at, as Josh was talking about, figuring out how to be even better at what you're already good at it and use it in a new or different way. Having been told myself many times over the years by men and women alike that I'm just too nice and that this quality doesn't naturally correlate with strong leadership, I am even more resolute that kindness and empathy are qualities that I will hold fast to and not lose sight of as a leader. Something I really believe and would encourage everyone, especially women leaders, to consider is that, as Josh has already explained, whatever you are most passionate about, what works to make you you, that's what you should try not to change and try to lean into when you're figuring out and developing your own personal leadership style.
Thanks so much, Jill. We really appreciate you sharing your personal experience there. As we continue the topic of authenticity of allyship, we're going to hear from our colleague Scott on kind of how gender equity is not a zero-sum game for men, and really their involvement is critical to moving towards gender equity. So Scott?
Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, everyone. This has been a wonderful discussion. I'm feeling a bit emotional. I'm honored to participate. Those who are on the panel here know I was reluctant to participate because I want to make sure the female voices are the ones that are being heard. Nevertheless, in addition to being a colleague to all these wonderful women, I am also a father to two intelligent, empathetic daughters who are young adults. One of the wonderful aspects of being a parent is that your children help you increase your awareness of the world from a viewpoint that's different from your own, with fresh eyes. So a number of things I've learned from them was just how tilted the world was towards male dominance. Well, I thought I was pretty aware. Their input with those fresh eyes, being females, helped me realize just how dramatic the tilt actually is. It also helped me kind of reshape my aspirations to be a proper male colleague to women. I'm hopeful my own experience, my position, my feelings can serve as inspiration and confirmation for others as well. And generally, I believe my role as a colleague, a leader, a friend, a human, a father, is to listen, observe, support, and evolve. I mean, collectively, and this message has been provided throughout today's session. Collectively, our objective is to create an environment that makes all women and all people comfortable enough to reach their full potential, to realize their aspiration.
Thank you so much, Scott. At this point, we're going to pause again for another poll. And Arlene, I'm going to turn it over to you. And it looks like we will also have time for some Q&A.
Hi, sorry, nothing like a technical when we're doing this live. Thank you, Scott, and thank you all of our panelists today. It's been great seeing everything that's going on in the discussions. So everyone should see now in the polls tab or a pop-up on your screen, what would you like to see men and really other women prioritize in being good allies? So we've got several suggestions here. I'm seeing some good stuff come in the Q&A. So we're going to give just a few more seconds here on the poll. That way we can get some good stuff. All right. And well, let's go ahead and end the poll. Wow. All right. So it looks like the top one came in to speak up to stop degrading commentary and ensure women's voices are heard in meetings. I think I saw in the Q&A something in regards to these meetings. So look forward to getting that started. Lindsay, back to you.
Great, thank you so much. So I do think, again, thank you for sharing your questions from the audience. We have two right now that we're gonna further discuss. The first one is, do you feel people can voice an opposing view or argument without fear of consequences? So I think if we could have maybe a male colleague and a female colleague both share kind of what they think. Any volunteers? Don't make me call on you.
Sure, Lindsay, I'll start.
Thanks, Jill.
Yep. So I think it all depends on the organization, right? It depends on the culture. And I think it's important to try and draw out that opinion. It's important to leave space so that that discussion can happen, and to ask for feedback and to ask for thoughts. And, where's everybody at on this? There's a lot of ways to do that. There are the, in meeting, open it up, where some people might be less likely to say something because they feel like it's going to be a very public way of doing it. But we do take advantage of a lot of polls and surveys and things like that. Lindsay referred to them from an HR perspective in the company, where we can do that anonymously. But also, we use that technique to try and get information from people. But I do think you have to try and solicit it. You have to ask people for those opinions. And then it becomes, as people start to voice them, it becomes more comfortable and more commonplace for people to, push the envelope a little bit and feel comfortable. And you have to make sure that there is no consequence, obviously, that's welcomed and that, it's encouraged.
Yeah.
I do think, Lindsay, I'm happy to chime in here too. I do think it's in a virtual world a challenge where you can't read oftentimes if people don't have their videos on body language to, you can see the thought bubble there and you can see that they want to say something but maybe are hesitant to. So that's something over time I've worked with my teams to create that safe space where oftentimes in those one-on-one sessions, you bring those same topics back up and say, hey, you look like you were about to say something. Why didn't you say something? Was it you weren't quite sure on the thought? Is it the environment that we can create? And encouraging them to share their voice, because a lot of people do have that imposter syndrome. And a lot of scientists in particular are very analytical, and they're not as good at throwing just ideas out over the fence and afraid to be wrong, because for so much of your lives, your career was doing very well in school and was doing very well in being very knowledgeable. So encouraging a safe place to throw out ideas, but also the key importance of those one-on-one and being able to read those nonverbal cues in meetings that says where you can revisit them back to how can I help you with finding your voice until you feel comfortable doing it, and then from there you kind of see it build on itself.
Thanks so much, Josh. I think this kind of leads into the next question from an audience member, which is Garo Reo had mentioned that Maxime is talking about issues that he faces on a daily basis. And so he's asking, what are some pointers to the panel members with regards to being heard at meetings, which is usually male dominated? So Josh, I think you already alluded to some of those. Is there anyone else from the panel that would like to expand on those ideas?
Just piggyback off of what Josh said. I can remember being nervous to speak up in meetings, especially as a more junior employee. And I would be sitting there and I would have crafted a response in my head and I'd be ready to say it, but just nervous about how it was going to be received, or am I not going to sound right? And so I agree that, leadership or whoever's leading meetings, without putting someone on the spot, or trying to solicit someone, who might not be comfortable. I do agree that, looking at someone and just saying, do you have anything to add? Because you feel valued when someone wants your opinion, and then you start to stop questioning yourself so much. At least for me, I felt that way.
That's great. Thank you. So inviting people into the conversation is a great way to ensure they're heard. We have another question from an audience member, and it's more along how have you seen, men interactions? Do you see that they have improved for women during your careers? So is there progress? Is it static or retro?
I guess I'll jump in there too, and I have one more comment back on the last discussion and Lindsay's point. I would say it depends, right? It is so completely dependent on the particular men that you interact with. Certainly, in general, I would say things have probably progressed over the course of my career, but you certainly run into those folks that are very much in a sort of an ancient mindset, and it's really quite different. So it does depend for sure. Just to go back to the point for a moment about people being heard. And one way to do that, this came up in one of our previous discussions, and someone made the point about much like Maxime talked about reiterating someone else's point, if that has to be done, and when you do it, to mention that person's name, and to say, much like Maxime just said, or like Lindsay just said, I agree with that, and to endorse it, but to call them out and to reinforce that person's role and, whatever their point was, is also maybe would give them the confidence to then add on, or, to get involved in the conversation a little bit more.
Thanks, Jill. I'm going to move on to the next question, which I think is more open for discussion. So I might call on a few of my colleagues here. But the question is, what are the main reasons there is currently a low percentage of male allies, and how can we improve on that? So Maxime and Monika, I'm kind of going to ask for both of your viewpoints here on what you think.
Monika, you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I think that it's no, actually, I don't have an answer to that, to be honest. But what I would like to say is that I was so at Leaksoft we have mostly girls, like there are mostly women working, and so actually men are in minority. But another thing is that we have a very young team. So we have a lot of, especially new developers that are like young girls. And when I was discussing the topic of the session to be honest, each of us had some situation in which we were certainly discriminated on in a less favorable situation. But what I noticed is that with the, let's say, younger generation, as younger than me even, there is a change. There is a change, there is more tolerance. There is more tolerance to differences. During discussion, I could really feel that this feeling that I'm a woman and I'm something less or is less visible. And I think that with the younger generation where there is more consciousness about the differences between each other, there will be more and more allies for women, for men, for different genders, and so on. So for me, it's hard to say why they are now not many, but I think there will be more and more with the upcoming year.
Thanks, Monika. We actually only have about 3 minutes left in our session, and we have a final call to action poll that we'd like to put up on the screen for everyone. I know there are a few other questions that were presented to us, which we have not had time to address. We will address those offline. And again, thank you so much for your participation and voicing your questions for the panel. Arlene, anything to add?
Everyone, to all of our panelists and to our audience for joining. We will follow up with those questions. You can find more information on LinkedIn on our diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations. What can you, after listening to our scientists here today talk about, commit to working on this year to be an ally? Either through acknowledging your own blind spots, looking out for potential and promise when hiring for your teams, or simply inviting others to the table, looking for those voices who aren't there, who could be there. We'd love to hear from you. We again thank you for participating, for putting your questions in the chat. If you have a topic that you'd like to see for next year, go ahead and you can email us at info@simulations-plus.com or to our marketing team. We always look for ways to improve and keep the conversation going. So I'm going to go ahead with just a few seconds here before the other sessions start. Go ahead and end the poll. And it looks like a lot of you are going to be inviting others to the table. We couldn't ask for a better way to end this session. Thank you for joining us. Head back to the lobby where you can navigate to the regular sessions and find all of the late breaking next gen science that's coming your way. Be sure to check out the new model informed compound development track. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.